I'm Liana, I'm 30 years old, and this whole thing started with a jewelry set my mom never thought she'd have to sell. I was 11 when my parents split up. My father, Gerard, was the kind of man who could be in the same room with you and still make you feel invisible. My mom, Amara, on the other hand, was warmth and fire wrapped into one person. When the custody stuff came up, I chose to stay with her. My half-brother, Leo, he was 9 then, stayed with my dad. Different moms? That part of the story never really mattered until later. After the divorce, things got quiet on my dad's end. Legally, he sent the child support every month, but that was pretty much where the involvement ended. No birthday cards, no phone calls, never showed up to school concerts or art shows. He wasn't mean or cruel, just distant, like he didn't know what to do with a daughter he hadn't chosen. I learned early on not to expect anything from him. My mom worked herself to the bone. She cleaned offices overnight and worked weekends at a bakery. There were weeks we only had one proper meal a day, and she'd always pretend she wasn't hungry so I could have more. She never made it feel like we were struggling even when it was obvious we were. I once caught her crying in the laundry room because the electricity was about to be shut off. She laughed it off and told me she'd just poked herself in the eye with a clothes hanger. I didn't believe her, but I didn't say anything. When I turned 17, I got accepted into a well-known arts university. I was over the moon. We were sitting at the kitchen table when I opened the letter. My mom was holding a chipped mug of black coffee, and her hands were shaking. We hugged, we cried, then reality hit us hard. The acceptance letter came with a deadline for the tuition deposit. We didn't have it, not even close. A week later, I saw her quietly pull out this old wooden box from the back of her closet. Inside was a gold necklace and a ring, delicate, vintage, and clearly not everyday jewelry. It had belonged to her mother, who died before I was born. She sold them to a local jeweler who didn't even bother pretending he wasn't lowballing her. She didn't flinch. She walked out of that shop, handed me the receipt for the tuition deposit, and said, "Don't ever feel bad about this. Just do something good with it." I kept that receipt, still have it in a shoebox in my closet. College wasn't glamorous. I lived on instant noodles and slept on a mattress on the floor of a shared apartment with 2 other girls. I picked up freelance gigs doing digital illustration for blogs, online stores, and the occasional YouTuber who needed banner art. It was barely enough to survive, but I kept going. I told myself I'd make it work. I had to. Graduation came with more rejection letters than I could count. I applied to every design firm, gaming studio, and animation company I could find online. 60 rejections. I stopped counting after that. I remember sitting in a cramped cafe with my laptop, scrolling through job listings, my back aching from all-nighters. Then one day I posted my portfolio on a few niche indie game forums. Not because I thought anything would happen, but because I figured, why not? A week later, I got an email from a small game studio based in Canada. They liked my style. They wanted to hire me for a short-term contract, 6 weeks of work, fully remote. I jumped at it. The project I worked on ended up getting more attention than anyone expected. When it launched, gaming YouTubers started picking it up. It snowballed. A year later, the same studio asked me to come on as a lead designer for their next project. I didn't think twice. It meant longer hours, higher expectations, but finally, stability. 2 years into that job, I'd built up enough savings, enough experience, and enough contacts to take a leap. I co-founded my own game development studio with 3 other creatives I'd met online. We weren't sure what would come of it, but we were tired of waiting for permission to make the kind of games we actually cared about. We worked out of living rooms and coffee shops. We coded through the night, did our own marketing, learned on the fly. Our first game dropped on Steam during a quiet release week, and for some reason, maybe timing, maybe luck, it took off. Players loved it. Streamers played it. It hit the charts and caught the attention of a big-name distributor. That's when everything changed. We got a publishing deal. My cut from that deal was the most money I'd ever seen in my life. I sat down with my mom that weekend and asked her for the full balance on her mortgage. She cried when I paid it off. Then I got her a car because hers had been on its last legs for years. I didn't tell anyone about the real estate investments I made after that. I kept it quiet. I didn't want anyone treating me differently just because I had money now. Funny how people start remembering you exist when they hear you've done well for yourself, especially the ones who forgot about you first. About 3 weeks after our game went viral, I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion or anything flashy, but it was a clean, modern place with a garden, good lighting, and enough space for me in my home office. I didn't make a big announcement, just posted a simple photo of my moving boxes on my private Instagram, where I only had close friends and former classmates. That's what made the call even weirder. It came from an unknown number. I normally don't pick up calls I don't recognize, but this one came while I was waiting for a delivery, so I thought it might be the driver. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard since I was 18. My father. At first, I didn't even recognize him. He was calm, almost cheerful. He acted like we'd just spoken last week. Told me he'd seen me on TV. Some local segment had done a piece on women entrepreneurs from our city, and apparently my photo showed up. That was his icebreaker. Then came the compliments. He called my success impressive and said something vague about always knowing I had it in me. He mentioned Evan, his son, my half-brother, was going through a tough time and that it'd be nice if we could all catch up over coffee soon. I didn't argue. I didn't bring up the past. I just told him I was really busy these next few months and couldn't commit to anything in person. I kept it short and got off the phone. Not even 4 hours later, I got a text. It was from the same number. There was a link and a short message underneath. Maybe you could help your brother. He's family after all. The link was to a GoFundMe page with Evan's photo on it. Apparently, he dropped out of university a year ago and was trying to re-enroll, but he owed $28,000 in unpaid tuition and fees. The description said something about him trying to turn things around and needing help for a fresh start. I didn't recognize the photo. It looked like a screenshot from a party. In the description, there was no mention of what caused him to drop out or what he planned to do once back in school. I sent the link to my mom right away. She read through it and called me. She didn't tell me what to do, just said to keep calm and handle it with grace. Her words exactly. She reminded me not to let old ghosts knock me off balance. She also asked if I wanted her to talk to Gerard, but I told her not to get involved. Later that night, I started scrolling through the comments on the GoFundMe. That's when things started to click into place. A few people, names I vaguely remembered from childhood, left messages like "so proud of you for asking for help when others forget where they came from, and your sister made it without help, sure, but family means something." It became clear that Gerard had been telling people I'd abandoned the family, that I'd made it big and cut everyone off, that I'd never needed help. The version of the story he'd passed around had no mention of Amara selling her last jewelry. No mention of the silence, the birthdays missed, or the fact that he hadn't spoken to me in 12 years. The next day, I sat down and wrote a short, polite email to him. I told him I wouldn't be donating. And that's it's not out of anger, but because our relationship was not in a place where that kind of support made sense. I said if there was any interest in rebuilding, it would need to start with real conversations, not favors. He responded within an hour. His reply wasn't calm like the call had been. He blamed my mom, said she poisoned me against him, and that I didn't know the full story. He claimed he did what he could, and that I was making him out to be a villain. I didn't respond. I saved the email, took a screenshot of the GoFundMe, and logged everything. I didn't plan on using it, but I knew better than to assume it would stop there. 2 days later, my studio got an email through the public contact form on our website. It was from someone who claimed to be a concerned family member. The message was vague, but suggested that our company might not be as legitimate as it seems and warned that we should be careful who we associate with. I checked with our admin and made sure we flagged the email. I set up Google alerts on my name and my company's name, just in case. We also reviewed our PR policies and made a few changes, like moderating all public comments on our social accounts and being more careful about what got shared. None of this was random. It was too well timed. The call, the GoFundMe, the shady email. My name was suddenly useful to people who had nothing to do with my life until now. I blocked my father's number after that. No warning, just blocked. If he wanted to talk, he'd have to find another way, and even then, it wouldn't change much. I wasn't going to be guilted into patching up a relationship that had only been convenient to him when it came with a $sign. I was at my mother's place for our usual Sunday dinner when I noticed something was off. She'd made roast chicken, like always, but barely touched her plate. Her eyes kept darting to the window, and she was unusually quiet between bites. She didn't try to hide it for long. Okay. That morning, Gerard and his wife Denise had shown up unannounced. First time in years. They hadn't even called ahead, just rang the doorbell like it was normal. My mother answered thinking it was one of her neighbors. Instead, she opened the door to both of them standing there with coffee cups in hand, acting casual. No warning, no reason, just a vague line about wanting to talk about family matters. They were there for over an hour. She offered tea because she's polite like that, but made it clear they weren't staying long. From what she told me, the conversation was mostly Denise doing the talking. She kept circling back to how now that Liana's in a position to help, it would mean a lot if she showed the family some kindness. Gerard didn't say much, just nodded along. My mother, even though she stayed calm, told them that kind of talk should be directed to me, not her. She didn't appreciate being cornered. I stayed for dinner, helped her clean up, and didn't raise my voice once. But when I got home, I sat down and wrote an email to Gerard. Short, direct, no emotional language. I let him know that from now on, any communication needed to go through my lawyer. I included my lawyer's contact information and told him that showing up uninvited at my mother's door was unacceptable. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, neatly folded into a pale pink envelope with no return address. The handwriting was tight and careful. It was from Denise. The letter started off polite, then it shifted into something else. She said she hoped I could see things from a stepmother's perspective, that raising Evan hadn't been easy, especially since his real sister wasn't around to help. She brought up how hard things were financially after the divorce, how they had to make sacrifices too. She never directly asked for anything, but the message was clear. About halfway through the letter, she mentioned a school trip I went on when I was 12, said they helped pay for it, even though money was tight. That was the only specific example she gave. I vaguely remember that trip. I also remember it was my mother who borrowed money from a coworker to cover the cost, not Gerard or Denise. It was subtle, but the whole thing read like one long guilt trip. A lot of family comes first. You've done so well. It wouldn't hurt to share, and sometimes people forget who was there in the background. I didn't reply. Instead, I took the letter with me to my therapy session later that week. It was already scheduled, and I figured I'd bring everything with me, emails, screenshots, even the envelope. We went over the timeline. I laid out every major milestone in my life from age 11 onwards. When I read it all back, the pattern was obvious. Gerard's involvement was almost non-existent. Denise wasn't even around until I was already in high school. Every time I'd hit a rough patch or needed support, it was always my mother who stepped up. That same night, I wrote a formal response. I didn't send it by email. I printed it, signed it, and mailed it. The letter was short and to the point. I stated that emotional manipulation, whether subtle or not, would not be tolerated. I reminded them that my success was not a shared asset and that no financial support would be given. I made it clear that any further contact about helping family would be considered harassment and handled through legal channels. 3 days later, my studio's contact inbox received another strange message. This time it was from someone claiming to be a freelance writer researching ethics in tech startups. They asked questions about my role at the studio, how we got funding, whether we had ever been audited, and if there had ever been any internal disputes. The tone was off, too pointed, too personal. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to our legal team and flagged the sender's address. My lawyer traced it to a newly created account with no digital footprint. Classic move when someone's trying to dig for dirt. We added additional filters to our site's contact form and briefed the rest of the team, just in case anything else came through. So far, nothing more has happened. but I've noticed small things. One of my mother's neighbors mentioned seeing Denise in the area again. A package I didn't order was left at my gate, no label, just a generic decorative box with nothing inside. It could be nothing. Could be someone trying to get under my skin. I've updated my home security system and started recording every piece of correspondence. I've gone over all our staff protocols at the studio too. I don't plan to give them the attention they're clearly trying to get, but I also don't plan on being caught off guard again. About 2 weeks after I mailed the formal letter to Denise and had the suspicious email forwarded to my lawyer, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. It turned out to be from an old neighbor of my father's side, someone who used to live 2 houses down from Gerard when I was a kid. He was calling to let me know that my great-uncle had passed away, my father's maternal uncle, the one who used to smoke cigars on the porch and give kids butterscotch candy from a dusty tin. I hadn't seen him in at least 15 years, maybe more. We weren't close, but he was kind to me when I was little, and I remembered how much my late grandmother used to care for him. Out of respect for her, I decided to attend the funeral. I didn't tell anyone I was going, just quietly looked up the time and location, wore a simple black dress, and slipped in through the back of the chapel. I sat in the last row, trying to stay unnoticed. That didn't last long. Gerard spotted me before the service even began. He walked down the aisle like it was a stage and made a big show of greeting me. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, turned to the nearest people in the row ahead, and said loudly, "This is my daughter, the successful one, the one on TV." I didn't say anything, just nodded and sat down. I felt every pair of eyes in the room look back at me. A few minutes later, Denise arrived. She didn't walk, she floated straight toward me and reached out like we were long-lost friends. She wrapped her hand around my arm and whispered, "It's good you came. Family always sticks together in hard times." I gently pulled my arm away and stayed seated. Evan showed up too, standing off to the side with a few cousins I barely recognized. He didn't look at me, not once. We'd lived under the same roof for a few years when we were kids, and now it was like we were strangers. The service itself was simple. A few words about my great-uncle's military service, some stories from neighbors, and a reading from his favorite psalm. When it ended, I slipped outside early, hoping to leave unnoticed. That didn't work either. Gerard caught up with me in the parking lot, walking fast, like he had something urgent to say. He started talking casually about the will, said there might be some property involved, a small house in the outskirts and maybe a piece of land. He mentioned that there could be some inheritance discussion soon, but quickly added that it would be nice if I didn't complicate things. He didn't say it outright, but I understood exactly what he meant. He wanted me to waive any potential claims so Evan could get everything cleanly. I asked if there was a will that named Evan. Gerard didn't give a straight answer, just said it would be best if I made a family-minded decision. I told him I had no interest in anything that belonged to a man I hadn't spoken to since I was a teenager. I didn't want the house, the land, nothing. I was only at the funeral to pay my respects. That should have been the end of it. But then he pushed further. He asked if I'd be willing to make a public statement, something saying I supported Evan receiving the estate. Said it would help smooth things with the rest of the family, especially since they all think I abandoned them. I told him I wouldn't be part of any public narrative. I wasn't involving myself in the estate at all. No interest meant no involvement. I got in my car and left. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was folded into an official-looking envelope with a plain return address and a printed label. Inside was a document that looked like it came from a law office. It referenced my great-uncle's estate and asked me to sign a waiver releasing any potential inheritance rights. It looked real with letterhead, legal language, and signature lines. I didn't sign anything. I sent it straight to my lawyer. Within 2 days, he got back to me. He'd called the firm listed in the letter, and they had no record of sending it. In fact, they weren't even representing the estate. Someone had used a public template and filled in the blanks to make it look real. It wasn't official. The signature at the bottom didn't match any of the lawyers on staff. We filed a report. There was no way to prove who sent it, but at this point, the pattern wasn't hard to see. Every time I stepped back, they pushed forward harder. First, it was the GoFundMe, then the ambush at my mother's house, then a funeral turned into a networking event, and now fake legal documents. My lawyer offered to send a cease and desist letter to Gerard and Denise. I gave him the green light. He drafted it and mailed copies to their home address and workplace. From this point on, I wanted everything documented. No more surprise contact. No more pretending this was just family tension. This was targeted pressure, dressed up in fake sympathy and forced nostalgia. They wanted access. I gave them boundaries. I was finishing up a product review call with my studio's team when I noticed a private message request pop up on one of my older social media accounts. It was from someone named Mara, and I recognized her right away. She was a year ahead of me in high school, and if one of those people you forget until their name shows up attached to something unexpected. The message was short but serious. She asked if we could talk about something she'd seen recently involving my father. I replied, and she sent over more details. Apparently, there had been a local town hall-style meeting hosted by a nearby church group. The event had included a small fundraiser segment where community members could share personal testimonies. Mara went with her aunt, not expecting anything dramatic. Then Gerard took the mic. She told me he gave a full, emotional speech about how some children forget where they came from. He said he'd been left in a nursing home by his own daughter and hadn't heard from her in years. He said she'd taken all the family savings and moved into a luxury house, leaving him with nothing. According to Mara, people were visibly upset. Some were crying. He even held up an old photo of the two of us when I was about 10, said it was the last time he felt loved by his child. None of it was true. Gerard doesn't live in a facility. He owns a 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburb with Denise. There's no family money I took. Amara raised me alone. and Gerard never gave me a cent outside of court-ordered child support. I hadn't spoken to him in years, and even that was only because he forced the issue recently. Mara told me she stayed after the event just to process what she'd seen. She didn't believe it. She remembered how my father never came to school functions, and how my mother always picked me up from art club with her apron still on from the bakery. Mara said she thought I deserved a heads up, just in case the story was gaining traction. I thanked her and called a meeting with my marketing consultant the next morning. We reviewed everything. No public mention of it yet, but we agreed to monitor for any mentions of my name attached to family drama. We decided not to post anything, at least for now. The safest move was to wait unless it snowballed. It didn't take long for the next domino to fall. By the end of that week, my business partners called a private meeting. One of our smaller investors had forwarded them a blurry clip of Gerard's speech, recorded by someone in the audience and uploaded to a small community blog. The investor wasn't accusing me of anything, but they had questions. They wanted to know if this was a personal matter that might turn into bad press. I sat down with the partners and walked them through the entire history. The estrangement, the GoFundMe, the funeral, the forged letter, everything. I showed them the cease and desist paperwork, screenshots of the letter from Denise, and the email trail we'd been keeping. They didn't ask me to cut ties or step back from any responsibilities. They just wanted transparency, and once they had it, they stood behind me. Still, they advised I prepare a neutral public statement, just in case it reached a bigger platform. While my lawyer reviewed options, I tracked down the church group that had hosted the fundraiser. I didn't call Gerard out by name. I simply sent them an email with clear documentation, real addresses, legal documents, public records, showing Gerard was not in any care facility and was financially stable. I added that I was his estranged daughter, had not been in contact beyond legal matters, and was being falsely represented without consent. 3 days later, the fundraiser segment was quietly removed from their blog. No public apology. Just a thank you to all who shared Story's message on their website. That was fine. I didn't need them to name him. I just needed the platform to go away. Then I got a phone call. Different number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Gerard. He was angry, loud, and accusing me of slandering him. He said I was destroying his reputation in the community, making him look like a liar, and that I owe him for all the years of fatherhood. The next morning, I got a flood of texts from Denise, all from another new number. She used phrases like "careful what you wish for" and "the internet would eat this up" if more came out. She didn't name what this was, just hints, jabs, and emotional bait. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and made a new folder titled Defamation Evidence. It was the first time I'd used those words officially. My lawyer said we'd start collecting every single instance, emails, calls, posts, messages, and even in-person speeches if we could track them. If it kept going, we'd be ready. For now, we're just logging and monitoring. But next time they cross the line, it won't be a private response. Our second game was set to launch at a major tech expo in New York. The studio had been preparing for months. Press kits, demos, live panels, and interviews were all lined up. The buzz online was solid. Influencers in the gaming space had preview copies, media outlets were teasing articles, and we had meetings with 2 potential publishers that could take us global. 3 days before the launch, I got a call from someone on the expo's internal planning team. They wanted to confirm the family-themed tribute segment I'd requested. I had no idea what they were talking about. I asked for the form. They sent over a PDF. It was submitted using my name and studio title, but the signature at the bottom was Gerard's. He had listed himself as a guest speaker under a segment, supposedly honoring the support families give to entrepreneurs. The form described him as the proud father of a groundbreaking female CEO, and included a short bio about how his guidance helped shape my leadership skills. The photo he submitted was a cropped version of a family picture from when I was maybe 12. I emailed the expo staff immediately and explained that no such request had come from me or my team. They were polite, but the issue wasn't simple. Gerard had already been approved and issued a speaker badge. Because the badges were scanned for access across zones, they couldn't fully revoke his credentials without creating a security exception, which they wanted to avoid right before opening day. The morning of the launch, I arrived 2 hours early to get set up and walk through the venue with our media team. When I got to our booth, I saw Gerard before he saw me. He was already inside the venue, standing confidently by one of the branded display panels wearing a black polo shirt with our studio's name printed on the chest. Not a shirt we made, a custom knockoff. Next to him, Denise was handing out folded flyers with the title Family Unity and Forgiveness. I pulled security aside immediately. They hesitated. He claimed to be my father, said he was there to support his daughter's big moment. He even pointed to his badge and said he was an approved speaker. Denise kept talking over them, telling anyone nearby that this launch was about more than just tech. It was about healing and coming back together. A reporter from a mid-sized tech blog approached Gerard, thinking he was part of the event, asked if he wanted to speak about being a parent to a founder. My PR assistant stepped in quickly and redirected the conversation, but it was already messy. My co-founder found me and pulled me into a side hallway. We had back-to-back meetings lined up, and he warned me this kind of drama, if it got picked up, could make potential partners second-guess working with us. It was the kind of distraction we couldn't afford during a major pitch cycle. I went straight to the venue manager. I showed them the cease and desist paperwork we had on file and provided identification that confirmed the submitted form wasn't mine. They brought in senior security and escorted both Gerard and Denise out. But not before Denise made a scene in front of the press area, accusing me of selling out my family for internet fame. People stopped to stare. A few phones went up. I don't know if any footage exists, but I know some attendees were whispering and glancing at me afterward. Later that afternoon, one of the expo organizers asked to speak privately. He told me that while they supported my position, they'd appreciate advance notice in the future if family matters like this were likely to create confusion. I understood what he meant. No one wanted a PR mess. Even if it didn't go viral, internal discomfort could still cost professional relationships. My PR manager took over handling communications for the rest of the day. She advised me to personally review and pre-approve all guest lists for future events, especially anything public-facing. We created a written protocol for how press and staff should handle unexpected attendees claiming to be affiliated with the studio. We logged the incident, filed a detailed report, and stored every document in our legal archive. The game launch still went well. We got strong reviews and both publishers confirmed follow-up meetings. But the tension lingered behind the scenes. My staff kept things professional, but it was clear they were uncomfortable with how quickly a personal issue became public. One of our interns asked quietly later that night if I was okay. I just told her everything was handled. Around midnight, I checked my email one last time. There was a message from a new address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "You humiliated me for the last time." It was from Gerard. The body of the message was short. He accused me of turning the industry against him, claimed I'd cost him a second chance to be part of something important. He said I'd embarrassed him in front of real people. He ended it by warning me that a storm is coming, and it'll come from places you didn't expect. I blocked the email, added it to the legal folder. I also flagged the sender's IP address in case the messages kept coming under different names. This time, it wasn't just a family issue. It was business interference. And I was done treating it like anything less. After everything that had happened, the fake speaking event, the threats, the rumors, I started pulling back from public appearances. Not out of fear, but because I needed space to breathe. I wasn't scared of my father anymore. I was just tired of his chaos creeping into every part of my life, even the parts I'd built completely without him. I'd already seen the divide in how people reacted to the Expo incident. Some people were quick to praise me for handling it professionally. Others leaned into his version of the story, saying I'd changed, gotten too big for my roots, become cold. The people who had seen my mother cleaning offices at 2 a.m., so I could have pencils for art class. None of them said a word. The only person who'd ever stood still for me through every single season of my life was my mother. When I told her about the latest message from Gerard, the one titled "You humiliated me for the last time," she didn't ask for details. She just said it might be a good time to go somewhere quiet. Not to run, but to recenter. I booked a cabin in northern Vermont for a week. Just me, my sketchbook, a stack of blank journals, and no internet. The first 2 days, I barely got out of bed. The third day, I started writing. I wrote everything, start to finish. From the day Amara sold her grandmother's gold necklace and ring so I could attend university, to the moment Gerard wore a knockoff studio shirt at my launch event and tried to pass himself off as part of the team. I wrote about my mother bringing home bruised apples because they were cheaper, about the first time I got paid for digital art, and about the night I got rejected from my 50th job post-graduation and still kept going. Somewhere in the middle of writing it all down, I decided I was going to do something I'd been planning for a long time, but never felt ready to launch. I finalized the paperwork to create a scholarship fund under my mother's name. It would be for young women pursuing careers in creative tech, illustration, design, game development, especially those without family support. The fund would run through a respected nonprofit that already had an infrastructure in place. The fund wasn't a publicity move. We didn't make a press release or stage a launch event. The welcome packet included a letter from me, though, not a speech, just a story. I told them about the jewelry. I told them about the GoFundMe. I told them that sometimes family doesn't look like what people expect, and that being supported doesn't always mean being understood, just that someone showed up. I told them they mattered, even if no one had told them that yet. Right after I got back from the retreat, I received another email from Gerard. No greeting, no context, just a scanned photo of a foreclosure notice taped to his front door. His house was being seized. No direct request for money, just a line at the bottom that said, "Your last chance to do the right thing by your father." I didn't reply. I sat with it for a few days. I couldn't sleep. I'd already blocked his previous accounts, but he used a different email every time. The message stuck with me, not because of guilt, but because I hated how much space he still tried to take up, even now. Over breakfast, I brought it up to Amara. She stirred her tea and looked up at me across the table, the same way she used to when I brought home report cards I thought she'd be disappointed with. All she said was, "I gave what I had, but I never begged. That's the difference." Then she got up to do the dishes. I made a private donation that day to a local housing nonprofit. I used Gerard's name, but I didn't list mine anywhere. I didn't want credit. I just didn't want anyone else to end up on a sidewalk over pride and bad choices. That was the last thing I did related to him. A month later, Amara told me, while folding laundry, like it was just part of the afternoon, that Gerard had moved in with one of his cousins out in a nearby town. Denise had left. Evan apparently had relocated to another state and hadn't kept in touch with either of them. My mother didn't say it to make me feel better. It's just passed along the update like a weather report. I nodded and went back to prepping for a client meeting. Time passed. The first small scholarship ceremony happened a few months later, hosted quietly by the nonprofit at a downtown library. 5 girls from different cities came together to accept the first round of awards. My mother stood beside me that day in a deep navy dress with pearl buttons. Around her neck was a jewelry set I'd designed and had made from 24-karat recycled gold, soft curves, subtle shine. It wasn't identical to the one she'd sold. It was better. It was new. No photos were taken for press, just a few Polaroids for the recipients and their families. But in one of them, someone caught my mother looking at the necklace in the reflection of a glass case behind her. That's the only version of legacy I'm interested in.